Hello, Internet. I'm going to talk about my favorite albums of 2021. Let's go. I'm going to start off with 10 honorable mentions in no particular order. Let's kick things off with Smiling with No Teeth by Genesis Owusu, the Ghana-born, Australia-based neo-soul icon that seized the spotlight this year with his debut album. It's 54 minutes, which is a bit hefty, but on it, Genesis is displaying some real musical dexterity. He smoothly glides from neo-soul balladry on the song Wait and Anya to uplifting synth funk on Don't Need You to pop rap and alternative R&B on Gold Chains to straight up post-punk on Black Dogs. And he does all of this with some undeniable personality, charisma, and swagger that makes it really easy to stay excited for the musical career ahead of him. Next, I gotta shout out the modern king of pop punk and sad white boy energy, Jeff Rosenstock, with his album Skydream. This album is actually a full-on re-recording of his previous album, No Dream, which was one of my favorite albums from 2020. The catch is that all of the songs have been rewritten with a ska punk mindset, which might sound like a bit of a joke, but the project actually pans out really well. Although Skydream admittedly loses a lot of the aggressive energy that I really love No Dream for, it replaces it with a generally much more positive and fun listening experience, while still maintaining Jeff's distinct style and personality. Of course, there are plenty of ska punk staples in the instrumentation, with the inclusion of horn instruments and plenty of long jam sessions. All in all, a very creative and refreshing second helping of an album that I already loved, and hopefully this album can act as a bit of a spark that revitalizes the ska punk genre, because ska punk has been in dire need of some TLC for several years now. Alright, I gotta shout out the Spanish screamo post-metal band Tenue with their album Territorios. It's a bold and daring album, which is simultaneously a single because the album consists of just one song that clocks in at over 29 minutes. And I'm amazed that for the entire length of the runtime, the band is able to maintain a super impassioned and angry intensity as the song goes through all of these different passages and progressions without ever getting stale or tiring. Next up is Roadrunner New Light, New Machine by Brockhampton. The boy band that's also a rap group is finally back to making bangers with their outlandish flair, like with the tracks Chain On featuring JPEG Mafia, Count On Me, and I'll Take You On. However, their ability to slow things down and get more emotional and introspective are present on this album in a big way too, like with the song What's the Occasion, and especially with the songs The Light and The Light Part 2, where Joba gets deeply personal and goes into detail about his father's suicide and how that's affected his mental health, how he's processed this tragedy, and how he's finally been able to move on with his life. And I apologize for highlighting such a dark topic in a bit of a, casual album video conversation, but I think it's a profoundly moving personal story that I can't just ignore when I'm talking about this album in particular. And, I'm thankful to know that Joba is in a better place, especially compared to some of the pretty depressing places that he's alluded to on previous albums. And I commend him for being able to pour such a traumatic and powerful part of his life into his art. Next up is Doom and Son by the band Bachelor. I want to highlight another album that this time also finds strength in grappling with negative emotions, but definitely on a bit of a less intense scale than the Brockhampton LP. Bachelor is actually the collaborative project of indie rock darlings J-Som and Palehound. And on their debut together, they come through with a pretty quaint little slacker rock, lo-fi indie album that pleasantly surprised me. The topics explored on this album, apathy, alienation, loneliness, they've been explored before, but something about this album just feels more modern and relatable than a lot of others. Like, we're all collectively being stressed out and burdened by the same external forces and societal norms. I also really enjoy the lo-fi aesthetic of the album. The guitar tones are very warm and summery, and there's a bit of feedback here and there, and the vocals are kind of shaky, but in a disarming, endearing kind of way that, again, just makes the album feel very relatable and easy to get into. All things considered, this might be my favorite true blue indie rock album of the year. Next up, I want to highlight another collab album, Made Out of Sound by Chris Corsano and Bill Orcutt. It's a free improvisation album composed entirely of just electric guitar and drums. Truth be told, free improvisation is an almost entirely new genre to me, so the way I describe this album is probably going to sound very cookie cutter to someone that's a little bit more familiar with the sound. I'm told by RYM that free improvisation builds on the exploratory nature of free jazz and classical indeterminacy in a freely improvised manner. But nonetheless, this album is a very interesting, what I would call experimental jazz rock album, because for the entire 30-minute runtime, it just really sounds like a bunch of uninhibited jam sessions. And I'm left fascinated by the performances with how chaotic and freewheeling, but simultaneously skilled and technical and purposeful they sound. To me, it really feels like Chris and Bill on the drums and guitar, respectively, are genuinely just playing whatever random notes at whatever random tempos they feel like, totally independent of each other. But somehow the final product is oddly gratifying, hypnotic, and even a little atmospheric. Next up is Local Valley by Jose Gonzalez, the only folk album making it on my list. Unfortunately, this year, I guess I just didn't get around to as many folk albums as I wish I had. But you better believe I listened to this Jose Gonzalez album after patiently waiting 6 years for it. When it's just his vocals and guitar on the track, Jose's music is truly some of the most calming, soothing music I've ever heard by any artist. Listening to Jose Gonzalez is like being lullabied and cradled to sleep as gently as possible. For the first time on a studio album, though, Jose also incorporates some light electronic beats to create some lively folktronica, like on the track Jome, which is sung in Jose's native tongue, Swedish, and even a reggaeton beat on the track Swing. It's just exciting to hear Jose explore different sounds on this album with success, but at the same time still delivering the trademark meditative folk music that I have come to adore. Next up is Schizophrenia Simulation by Sewer Slut. I hate saying that name out loud, but anyway, I want to highlight this new Sewer album as I think it's their best work yet. Like someone else that I'll be talking about later on this list, Sewer is cut from a very interesting cloth of cryptic weirdos who make electronic music on the internet. In particular, Sewer makes atmospheric drum and bass, trance, even hardcore EDM. And they've gained quite a following in just the past couple of years with a handful of releases. The production is often a bit harsh and staticky, and the lengths of the tracks can run pretty long sometimes. But on this album, I think Sewer is delivering some of their most immediately catchy songs, some of their most aggressive in-your-face songs, and in general, just an album that has a bit more bite to it than usual. There's some really interesting vocal samples throughout the album, mixed in with really aggressive passages of drum and bass that keep the whole thing sounding energized and engaging, even for its 68-minute runtime, where a lot of different ground gets covered stylistically. It never ends up being tiring or monotonous. Next up is one of my favorite jazz albums of the year, Nafset Piece by Jabi. Jabi is an instrumental jazz fusion quartet from Lahore, Pakistan. The album also has credits to UK flautist Tenderlonius and Polish pianist Ladernik on every track. The grooves and progressions on this album are simply wonderful, and especially the bass lines are so driving and intoxicating. There's also a really colorful blend of instrumentation, from flute to moog to even traditional Indian instruments like the tabla, which are twin hand drums, and the sarangi, which is a bowed string instrument. And it all melds together to create a very spiritual ambience. The style of this album is also really exciting in that it's undeniably a jazz fusion album, but it often nearly spills into an instrumental hip-hop kind of sound, which is no surprise once you learn that in 2016, Jabi marked the 10th anniversary of Jay Dilla's death by releasing an Indian classical take on the Detroit rapper-producer's Time, the Donut of the Heart. And my final honorable mention of the year is going to go to Slitherman Activated by RXK Nephew. Trap, hardcore, hip-hop, New York rapper who goes by several different names and already has a slew of albums and mixtapes to his names, is slowly but surely starting to gain some momentum this year with this project and also with his other album, Make Drunk Cool Again. The standout thing about RXK Nephew to me, though, is the fact that he just sounds straight up deranged on some of these songs, to the point of being both absurdly funny and concerningly violent. The song that really stopped me in my tracks during my very first listen is Early Age Death, where RXK raps, "This beat make me want to kill people. My chain make people want to kill me. I killed the brother who made this beat. I kill my mama for having me. I kill my daddy for fucking my mama. I'd kill my mama just for being my mama." It's just so ridiculous and unnecessary. And on top of that, RXK's absolutely psychotic delivery. He's really just screaming at the top of his lungs. I mean, if this doesn't at least grab your attention while you're listening to it, I don't know what will. All right, and with that, we're going to move on to my top 20, which is ordered. Starting with number 20, which is Zapper by NanoRay. I fortunately stumbled upon NanoRay's music this year. He, she, they, I have no idea honestly, are yet another in a long line of enigmatic internet weirdos who make electronic music these days. It's kind of a whole genre at this point. This niche of the music sphere is still pretty new to me. I mean, I do love Machine Girl and Sewer Slut, but there's just so much to uncover here because it's so, I don't know, it's just a culture that can only exist at this moment in time. And I don't want to say it's insular, but it's definitely not concerned with gaining popularity in the traditional sense. It's like rave music for weebs and weirdos, and even if that's an insult, here I am listening to it. Zapper is the first of 2 NanoRay albums released this year, and it's an intensely colorful hardcore breaks and drum and bass album that is constantly blasting you with playful yet chaotically aggressive sounds and sequences. My favorite song, Salmon Cannon, is just all over the place with zany vocal samples to urban futuristic sounding dance music to vicious drum and bass sections, and it's constantly jumping between all of these different styles without a moment's notice. It's a quick 30-minute dose of high BPM, feel-good electronic music, albeit with a particularly peculiar aura. At number 19 is Butterfly 3000 by King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard, the second album released this year by Melbourne's own King Gizzard. What kind of band is King Ghiz? I don't even know how to answer that question anymore. At this point in their career, they've already hit us with plenty of psychedelic rock and garage rock type albums, but they've also released metal albums, microtonal albums, an acoustic album, even a jazz album. This time around, they're taking a swing at psychedelic pop and synth pop. And of course, they succeeded with flying colors. And I literally mean flying colors. The production on this LP is kaleidoscopic and euphoric. The thing I admire most about this album is just how infectiously joyful and blissful it is. The intro song, Yours, is so undeniably happy. I dare you to try listening to this thing without feeling good or smiling. You've got the ethereal synth melody frolicking about, you've got lead singer Stu McKenzie's airy dream pop-like vocals comforting you, and you've even got some plucky, bouncy acoustic guitar passages. My favorite song, Catching Smoke, is almost aggressively cheerful. Contrast that though with the lyrics, which are about getting high, but also about being indulgent and hedonistic, chasing the ephemeral. There's certainly some depth here to take in just beside the flashy production. And I love the seemingly endless layer of keyed instruments that are playing on this track. From organ to synth to even what sounds like a moog. It's just an ultimate hippie anthem by the 21st century's premier psychedelic rock band. Number 18 greets us with Black to the Future by Sons of Kemet, my favorite jazz album of 2021. Admittedly lands a little bit lower on the list. I didn't notice until a bit too late in the year that I wasn't listening to as many jazz albums as usual. But nonetheless, this is a great Afro-jazz, Afro-beat album fronted by none other than saxophonist and bandleader extraordinaire Shabaka Hutchings. I could go on and on about Shabaka and his multitude of great bands. The Comet is Coming, Shabaka and the Ancestors, and of course Sons of Kemet. I mean, the amount of work that this man is putting in to carry the torch for contemporary jazz music, it's mind-boggling. Zeroing in on Sons of Kemet, though, this album is yet another excellent addition to their growing discography. Like the last Sons of Kemet album, this is a very conscious and politically concerned album that has a bit of a concept underlying everything. Might be easy to miss unless you're reading the track listing one song after another, right? The band's instrumental makeup is 1 saxophone, 1 tuba, and 2 drummers, which is just such a unique recipe for a band. In the past, it's been really impressive to hear how much they're able to accomplish with just those 4 instruments, along with the occasional guest vocalist. Especially with 2 drummers, you often get to hear some really exciting polyrhythms. On this album, we're getting more of the band's usual helping of fierce energy and passionate performances. What's also a bit of a fresh and unexpected addition is what sounds like clarinet and flute throughout the album. But perhaps the most standout performances on this album are by the superbly curated guest vocalists. This LP is bookended by 2 powerful, sermon-like performances by guest poet Joshua Idehen, as he fervently preaches about the Black struggle. And my favorite track has got to be For the Culture, featuring guest rapper Double DE, laying down some downright disgusting verses and choruses as he's backed by a thumping, driving tuba, fluttering woodwinds, and of course Shabaka's nocturnal saxophone. I mean, this is one supremely mind-blowing way to arrive at a jazz rap song. Overall, this is just an awesome jazz album, especially if you're curious to hear what jazz music sounds like in 2021.
Number 17.
Telephone Dreams by Wolf Circus. Here's my indie pop album of the year. And it's quite unfortunate because this band only has like 200 monthly Spotify listeners. Please, very please, check this band out. It's the most endearing, charming indie pop that I've heard all year. I would primarily call it a synth pop album, but there's a lo-fi, minimal, almost bedroom pop DIY aesthetic to it that just makes it feel like music that's also born on the internet. The songs Telephone Dreams and Crazy Feeling are some of my favorite songs of the year because of just how sweet they are. And I don't mean sweet as in like sugary, like the same way you might describe pop music. I mean like cute. There's just something so cute about the aesthetic of this whole project. It's just so fucking adorable. It's just some of the most sincerely positive music that I've heard all year. Listening to this album makes me want to hug someone. I think also what's remarkable is just how much Wolf Circus is able to accomplish with so little. The instrumentals are pretty minimal and simple, but it just lends so much clarity to the overall songwriting, melody, and lyrics that naturally give everything a personable and personal feeling. Of course, I recommend every album that's showing up on this list, but I very highly recommend this album in particular for its very upbeat and warm vibes, and also in the hopes that Wolf Circus can achieve greater fame because they certainly deserve it. Number 16 on my list lands us at For the First Time by Black Country New Road. It's a debut studio album from the 7-piece post-punk art rock London band that has been turning quite a few heads. This LP does a great job of being experimental without ever sounding too heady or off-putting. At all times, it's pretty easy listening, dare I say accessible, but definitely with an unorthodox flavor. Take the fantastic opening track instrumental, which is, unsurprisingly, a 5-minute instrumental track that sets the tone for the album with fireworks. From its dainty keyboard melody to the killer rhythmic drum patterns, to the overall progression of the song and how it builds up into this barn-burning, dense instrumental symphony with soaring saxophone and violin performances. You might think that people aren't in the market for 5-minute long instrumental rock songs anymore, but I challenge you to listen to this track and then tell me that you're not in the mood to listen to the rest of this album. Good luck with that. And I'm loving this trend that, to me at least, seems to be taking hold recently with experimental rock bands incorporating more jazz instrumentation. It's really an opportunity for these musicians to flex their true songwriting grit and compositional prowess. It doesn't take very long on track 2, Athens, France, for us to be greeted by lead vocalist Isaac Wood and his anxious monologue-like delivery. His idiosyncratic presence adds just another layer of suspense to the already complex and progressive nature of the band's music. I think this band's unique personality shines brightest on the second half of the track Sunglasses, where the band effectively throws a beat switch at us, followed by Isaac's manic ranting and Lewis Evans' saxophone practically howling at us. All in all, just a ballsy art rock and post-punk record with a lot of personality that's got my mouth watering for more. A really promising debut from this band. And lucky for us, we don't even have to wait that much longer for the band's sophomore album, which is already slated for February of 2022. Number 15, Sometimes I Might Be Introvert, or Simbi by Little Simz. Of course, this album's on my list. It's on basically everyone's 2021 year-end list. And rightfully so. This is the 4th album from UK rapper Little Simz, who really had a breakout with her previous 3rd album, Grey Area. On that album, Simz came off as a genuine soul, rapping about the female struggle, about anxiety, about failed relationships, about growing up and becoming a rapper, and more. She was really just an easy person to root for, and all of that basically gets turned up to 11 on Sometimes I Might Be Introvert. On this project, we're getting songs about the prejudices faced by Black women, a song about Little Simz coming to terms with her shitty father, and a lot of songs about loneliness and introversion. When is it better to be alone versus be with someone who takes advantage of you or someone who doesn't truly care about you? The verses are all delivered with deadly precision and confident poise, really showcasing just how far Simz has come as both a rapper but also as a human being, while also pondering on still how far she has to go. Simz's skills on the mic really cannot be understated. She is the kind of wordsmith that I wouldn't be surprised if she took home a Pulitzer Prize one day. We're also getting a very ambitious, original, pretty conceptual album this time around too. The record is 19 songs long, 65 minutes, and a lot of it is wrapped in a very orchestral, triumphant, monumental presentation that makes the stage feel very grand. There are several skits laced throughout the track listing where Simz is seemingly talking to herself, or at the very least reflecting in her own mind with her conscience about following your heart, getting your hopes up, being introverted. It's all just very relatable and raw. I don't know, it just makes Lil Simz out to be a very likable person that I'd love to sit down and have a heart-to-heart with, despite the fact that she's putting on this huge, meticulous, extravagant, larger-than-life show for us. Number 14, OK Human by Weezer. Definitely a guilty pleasure pick, I'll admit it. Weezer has nothing to prove at this point in their careers, but I, probably like many of their fans, have a pretty tenuous love-hate relationship with the band, just because of how inconsistent and unpredictable their output is these days. Luckily though, OK Human is a great addition to the Weezer catalog. We all know the general vibe of Weezer's music at this point. It sounds joyful, but it's tinged with notes of melancholy, of longing, of insecurity. You need look no further than the very first line of lyrics on this album for that. All my favorite songs are slow and sad. I don't know what's wrong with me. There's the fourth song, Numbers, where lead singer Rivers Cuomo laments comparing yourself to others, feeling inadequate. There's the fifth song, Playing My Piano, where Rivers gives a melodramatic but also really endearing performance about the escapism he seeks and finds when he's simply just playing his piano. So all of the regular tells of Weezer's music lyrically are here. But the unique part of this project is all of the orchestral string, instruments, and piano that are basically center stage the entire time. We all meme Weezer pretty hard, rightfully so, they seem to enjoy it, about the fact that we kind of know what to expect from them at this point. A nerdy power pop alternative rock band that has influenced an entire generation of culture. But I'd say for the first real time in their discography, they're finally exploring some new ground with the sound of this project, and they do it really well. I really adore the instrumental arrangements on basically every song. Even though Weezer is mostly approaching the same topics that they always do lyrically, the chamber pop sound just does so much to recontextualize everything in such a lush and satisfying way. Like with the closing track, La Brea Tar Pits, it's one of my favorite songs of the whole year. I love how the strings and piano and Rivers' vocals come together on the chorus, and I especially love how the string arrangements just like dance along to the melody on the second verse. And this is without a doubt the most beautiful record Weezer has ever put out. Who can say what the band has in store for us next, but I'm extremely grateful just to have this album. And say what you will about Weezer, but there's no questioning that they have more than just a handful of great albums in their discography. Number 13, it's LW by King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard, the first studio album released by King Ghiz this year. Yes, I'm quite the King Ghiz fanboy if you didn't already know that. This is the King Giz's third foray into microtonal tuning with their signature psychedelic rock edge, and I think it's an exceptional outing. I'm loving how wicked and nefarious the guitar tones all over this album are sounding. They're just so gnarly. King Ghiz is still approaching the microtonal sound with fresh ideas, and of course, the tuning gives everything a bit of a desert feel to it. Similar to their record Flying Microtonal Banana, which is a fantastic record, this record has plenty of great, drawn-out jams that are just super hypnotic and entrancing. With the seventh song, Ataraxia, another of my favorite songs of the year, I just love the main guitar melody that runs through the track. It's like spooky. And in the second half of the track, there's this instrumental breakdown with the same main guitar melody, but palm muted and repeated over and over along with drum and bass. It's just so awesome and mesmerizing, but at the same time, it's got this energy of like a battle being fought in the desert. I'm sure it would make any King Ghiz mosh pit go insane. I actually love the last three tracks on the album in general. The album just finishes so strong, starting with Ataraxia and then the eighth song, See Me, which has this vibraphone sounding instrument that carries the melody. So it gives the track a bit more of a springy, almost magical feel to it. It's still, everything is sounding a bit unsettling or villainous. Truth be told, I really don't know what it is. Maybe it's the microtonal tuning being used to great effect, but the quirky, angular melodies all over this album just scratch an itch for me that I can't really find or even describe in other music. The final closing track, KGLW, sees King Ghiz returning to a slow, chugging doom metal sound that they've totally nailed in the past with songs like Great Chain of Being and Superbug. It ends the album off with a fiery bang, and I'm honestly pulling for a doom metal King Ghiz album because I think that would pan out wonderfully. I'm just being greedy though. I have no grounds to complain about King Giz's output both this year and in the past several years. Alright, we're starting to get up there now. Number 12 is Nurture by Porter Robinson. We're landing at my electronic album of the year. It's been 7 long years since Porter dropped his debut studio album, Worlds. So we've all been waiting with bated breath, and the wait was well worth it. It's interesting because in some ways, stylistically, this album doesn't sound that different from Worlds. Sonically, it's a similar approach to electropop and synthpop that we already love Porter for, but it's the overarching concept, the lyrical content, and overall album writing where Porter's growth really shines. Nurture marks to me a trend of EDM that, oddly enough, is one of dealing with mental health issues, depression, and negative feelings in general. EDM stereotypically is really fun, really upbeat, really euphoric, and I can still say all those things about this album. But in the past, where EDM would kind of act as escapism, that's just not happening here at all. It's even right in the title. What is Porter Robinson nurturing? Well, he's nurturing himself. He's putting in the effort to cultivate happiness and positive memories. Let's look at the lyrics for some of my most played songs this year off this album. Look at the sky, I'm still here. I'll be alive next year, I can make something good. So tell me how it felt when you walked on water. Did you get your wish? 'Cause getting made you want more and hoping made you hurt more. Oh, there must be something wrong with me. And getting made you want more and hoping made you hurt more. Someone tell me something comforting. Super sensitive and vulnerable lyrics about moving on, pushing through, trying your best, and Porter is certainly no slouch when it comes to the beats. The production on all of these tracks is just gorgeous. Even though this is high BPM music that would fit right in at any major festival, there's just something so warm and soothing about what's happening on this album. Just like the album cover, it's like you're being hugged by a bed of flowers when you really, really feel like you need it. The end product is an uplifting album that sounds like it's trying its very hardest to be happy in spite of all of its pain, and that is truly valuable. Just outside of my top 10, it's Mirrors by Pupil Slicer. There's still some more heavy loud rock albums that we've yet to get to on my list, but this album is possibly the most brutal on my entire list. How could it not be with a band name like Pupil Slicer? Oh. London mathcore and metalcore trio Pupil Slicer erupt onto the scene with their debut album that's absolutely hard as nails. If you're into classic mathcore bands like Converge and the Dillinger Escape Plan, then this band is right up your alley. They're definitely influenced by those bands, but they never come off as sounding derivative. The thing that truly wows me about this album is that they are just constantly giving 100% the entire time. It is an unrelenting metalcore album that moves at lightning fast speed and is just constantly bombarding you with blast beats, jagged guitar melodies from every direction, and lead singer Kate Davies' absolutely putrid scream vocals. There's barely any moments of respite to be found here, and even when things cool down just for a second, it's barely enough time for you to catch your breath before being thrown right back into the whirlpool. Just listening to this album is like a workout. And of course, there's a lot of music out there that can sound very loud and noisy and abrasive, but it just kind of ends up being this wall of sound that you're merely observing from the outside and have nothing to do with. Not with this album, though. This album just has such a visceral, blistering energy that sucks you in and beats you to a pulp. Maybe it's something about the overall production that's gritty without ever being messy, but I'm not kidding when I say that this album, I think it raises my blood pressure. I bet seeing these guys live would be like standing in the middle of a nuclear explosion in hell. All right, top 10, here we go. Number 10 is Drunk Tank Pink by Shame. Just cracking the top 10 is the sophomore album by London post-punk band Shame, who made a pretty big splash in 2018 with their debut album Songs of Praise. I actually really like that album, and I've even seen Shame live. It was a great concert with great energy. Lead singer Charlie Steen was shirtless and yelling his lungs out on the mic. But for some reason, I was nervous that Shame was a band that would kind of fall by the wayside unless they ruin popularity. That would definitely hinge on them avoiding a sophomore slump. Well, luckily they've leaped over the sophomore slump with ease, and it sounds like they've been listening to a lot of parquet chords while doing so. Whereas their debut album was a full throttle non-stop frenzy, this album has more of a cool, suave dance punk edge while still maintaining the great rhythmic guitar riffs and fierce rebellious energy that made the band so interesting to begin with. It's really exhilarating to hear this band develop their sound and push forward in a fresh, new direction already so soon. Even just on the second track, Nigel Hitter, we're hearing a song that would have stuck out like a sore thumb on their debut because of how groovy the guitar leads are. Also the super danceable drum beats that syncopate with the lead guitar, and there's even some hits of cowbell. And the fourth track, March Day, is parquet chords worship if I've ever heard it, which is fine because I fucking love parquet chords. Everything from their herky-jerky guitar melody, even to the timbre of Charlie's vocals. On the next track, Water in the Well, they're suddenly sounding like Talking Heads, but with the distortion turned all the way up. Overall, I'd say instrumentally, this album is a lot more upbeat and fun compared to their debut. But Charlie's deadpan vocal delivery and witty lyrics, along with the band's general great energy and engaging songwriting, keep everything firmly sounding like the Shame that I'm growing to love. Number 9 is my metal album of the year, and that's Imperative Imperceptible Impulse by AdNauseam. Sophomore album by Italian avant-garde metal band AdNauseam. This album is a thrill ride, and while it's not quite as unforgivingly pummeling as the Pupil Slicer album, I think this album succeeds in finding merit through its winding song structures and just how immaculate the textures and sound palettes are all over the thing. The sound of this album is just otherworldly and vile. It's downright demonic, from the guttural vocals by singers Andrea and Matteo to the dissonant down-tuned guitars. And I love how well-produced the album is. It's probably the most well-produced album this year just because of how many different instrumental layers are being expertly balanced. Take the second song, Inexorably Ousted Sente. There is an excellent passage where you're getting hit with blasting, buzzing guitars and bass leads at unpredictable timings. I'm a sucker for odd time signatures. You've got these shrill, cascading guitar riffs repeating in the background. You've got these machine gun blast drum fills popping in and out from every direction. You've got the low, growling, persistent lead vocals, and somehow all of these moving parts come together perfectly. You can pick out each instrumental layer and hear exactly what's going on. It's like the production on this project is so harmonious that it allows the end result to just be pure, unfettered chaos. If you're looking for a progressive metal or death metal album with great songwriting, a foreboding and sinister atmosphere, and top-notch production, then you gotta check this album out. Number 8 is my post-rock album of the year, and that is The Machine is Burning and Now Everyone Knows It Could Happen Again by Bruit. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. My French is a bit choppy. Bruit is an instrumental post-rock band from Toulouse, France. They've only been around for a handful of years and are now dropping their debut album, which is a masterfully dynamic and cohesive record, often effortlessly switching in between moments of instrumental climax and peaceful serenity. I'm a sucker for albums that have a strong progression or flow, and this album has that in spades. It runs at 40 minutes, but it's only composed of 4 distinct songs that are each anywhere from 8 to 12 minutes in length. The first track, Industry, starts off slow but swells powerfully to create this amazingly bombastic tone setter. The stringed instruments are prominent and epic, and the drumming on this track is one of my favorite drumming performances all year. It's such an explosive intro song, but then it somehow mellows out and segues seamlessly into the second track, Renaissance. All of the tracks segue into each other. Renaissance features this beautiful acoustic guitar, piano, it sounds like a xylophone or vibraphone. Then as the song continues, we're introduced to some synth passages, which give the song an almost IDM feel to it. But again, the drumming on the album keeps everything so fiery. Of course, you've also got that reverb-soaked, blaring guitar hanging in the background. It's a bit of a cliche, I know, but I didn't listen to too much post-rock this year, so it's fine with me. The third and fourth songs also add a lot to the listening experience. The third track being the most somber on the album, and the fourth track having this slow, epic, awesome building finale that eventually calms things down and sends us off softly and sweetly. This album is just an expert display of songwriting and a great post-rock album overall. Again, because of how nicely the whole thing flows, it's super easy to just hit play on track 1 and breeze through the entire thing. Give this thing a listen, especially if you love post-rock, and I also highly recommend the album Visualizer on YouTube. Number 7 is By the Time I Get to Phoenix by Injury Reserve. Arizona rap trio Injury Reserve had been steadily growing their following for the past couple of years with catchy tunes, interesting production, and their emphatic, energetic brand of hardcore hip-hop. Very tragically, though, last summer, member Stepa J. Groggs passed away. I'm sure the concern of carrying on the Injury Reserve name was not immediately on anyone's mind after hearing this news, but somehow the group dropped their sophomore studio album this year. I'll be honest, I've liked Injury Reserve in the past, I've seen them live, but I've just never been as on board the Injury Reserve hype train as everyone else. However, this album has immediately become my favorite in their entire catalog. And without knowing better, you might think that that's because this new album is the group building upon the sound and style they've been crafting for years, or that it's the ultimate satisfying evolution from the band that I've been waiting for. But that's actually not what has happened at all. What Richie with a T and Parker Corey have done with this album is taken the most radical, unpredictable left turn that probably no one on earth could have ever seen coming. This album is an experimental hip-hop album that is schizophrenic, frustrating, head-scratching, and just plain fucked up in all of the best ways possible. Just take the first single, Knees, that got released in promotion for the album. That song is quite literally music to go insane to. I mean, the beat on this thing, and granted, I'm not a music theory expert by any means, but I've tried and tried and tried, and I have no fucking idea what time signature is even happening on this track at all. The fact that Richie and Stepa are even able to coherently lay down vocals on this beat just blows my fucking mind. And to say that they're merely laying down vocals is an understatement. No, they're drunkenly and depressingly slurring verses about getting old, about watching your body wither away, about feeling powerless, and the consequences of alcoholism. This is likely the most anxiety-inducing song of 2021, and it truly inspires awe in me that people are even capable of making music like this. And there are so many other fantastic songs throughout the track list. The second song and single, Superman That, is probably the most energetic track on the album, with its footwork-like beat and Richie's robotic delivery on the chorus as it leads. The third song, SS San Francisco, is like a demented post-apocalyptic guerrilla song with that devilish bass line and guest rapper Z Loopers practically yelping from the ether like the ghost of 2D. Possibly my favorite song on the album and the most straightforward is Smoke Don't Clear. That song is an off-the-wall banger with its guzzed out beat and Richie's heavily layered and breathy chorus. It's animalistic. I've seen some people go as far as to say that Injury Reserve are creating a new genre with this album, and personally it's hard for me to take a stance either way here. I mean, does this album count as experimental hip-hop? I would say barely yes, but at the same time, it's also barely even a hip-hop album. I certainly struggle to come up with any other album that sounds quite like this one. So I think I can confidently say that this is the most boundary-pushing album of 2021. And while I do love this album, truthfully, at times it's even a bit too heady and out there for me to get into. It's a very rewarding listen, albeit a very challenging one, and an album that's difficult to get your head around. I have to imagine, though, that this is the kind of album that can only get better with age as I grow to better understand and appreciate all that's happening here. But for now, I'll throw the project comfortably at the number 7 spot on my list. Number 6 is Dope Game Stupid by Bruiser Wolf. I'd say this is my pick to satisfy hip-hop purists in 2021, but simultaneously, there's nothing standard about what's happening on this album. Bruiser Wolf is a Detroit rapper and member of the Bruiser Brigade, which is a Detroit rap crew and record label helmed by Danny Brown. This year actually saw quite a bit of activity and collaboration from this crew, including albums dropped by members JUS, Fat Ray, Z Loopers, and even a dedicated Bruiser Brigade album titled TV62. I want to point out specifically Bruiser Wolf's 2021 abstract hip-hop album Dope Game Stupid for being one of the most unique sounding hip-hop albums that I've heard in quite a while. This album truly stands out because of both Bruiser Wolf's one-of-a-kind vocal delivery and even the timbre of his voice, and also because of just the sheer volume of hilarious and outrageous one-liners throughout this record. Let's just look at some examples. The riots is over, but Detroit's still lootin'. We be ballin' rims big, we can't miss like we hoopin'. Bitch, I'm number 1, but it's a 2 cause I'm poopin'. My bitch gonna miss me, but once I'm gone for good, like her virginity.
But you can't develop unless you're Revis. I get nothing but head, Beavis.
Like, this album is just chocked full of bars that are simultaneously really clever and witty, but also just absurdly dumb. I can't help but shake my head with joyful disappointment whenever I'm listening to this record. And the absurdity of these lyrics are intensely magnified by the fact that Bruiser Wolf has such an original sounding flow. His voice just sounds odd, and the delivery teeters between rapping and just straight up spoken word with a slightly melodic inflection. I guarantee that if you listen to this album, even if you don't like it, you will definitely never forget what Bruiser Wolf sounds like. The beats on this project are great as well. They're a bit subdued, a bit minimal and easy to track, but they've got an odd quality to them that just complements Bruiser Wolf's style and performances nicely. There's some more straightforward, legit bangers here too. I wouldn't quite say that they're bangers that you'd play at the club exactly, but tracks like the title track Dope Game Stupid and I'm an Instrument featuring Danny Brown have great party energy to them. This is a supremely interesting mix of strange sounds, goofy quotables, eclectic vocal performances that culminates in, dare I say, the most unique sounding hip-hop album of 2021. All right, top 5, here we go. And I've got a pretty spicy pick to start things off with Life of Pierre 5 by Pierre Bourne. Another guilty pleasure pick for sure, but this is my list, all right? If you want to boil it down, I would admit that this project is essentially a basic trap record, but by no means is it run-of-the-mill. Pierre Bourne is one of the most in-demand rap producers right now. He's produced songs for Kanye, Drake, and most notably produced almost the entirety of the modern trap rap classic Die Lit by Playboi Carti. Once in a while, though, he'll also hop in the booth and lay down vocals for his own beats. If you like trap rap, then you're going to love this album. It's loaded with bangers, it's got great energy, but what sets it apart from the slew of contemporary trap rap projects coming out today is really Pierre's production. It's colorful, almost zany, but it's never alienating. This album at its core is an undeniably fun project that is accented by Pierre's production quirks, like dainty little synth melodies that hang in the background, or his hypnotic layering of ad-libs. Doubtlessly the most ambitious part of this project, though, is how seamlessly every song segues into the next to create an incredibly cohesive, vibe-worthy album that even with a runtime of 1 hour never gets stale, never stalls out. It's like you'll be at the tail end of one song's runtime, but you're actually already starting to hear the elements of the next song. For example, I love the song Retroville, but the lead melody of that song actually starts in the previous song, 40 Clip. So if I want the full Retroville experience, I have to listen to the entirety of 40 Clip so that I can hear it segue into Retroville. Then the end of Retroville slowly drifts off and slows down in pace to become the next song, Drunk and Nasty, which is also a great song. So it's like, well, I might as well let this song play out too. Admittedly, the biggest complaint I've seen lodged at this album are that the lyrics are a bit bland. Is Pierre Bourne waxing poetic on these tracks? No, he's singing about getting money, getting high, sex, kind of boilerplate trap rap lyrics at this point. But at the same time, you shouldn't go into the candy aisle expecting to find something healthy. If you want to feel like partying, then you'll put this album on and you'll have a great time. And even with the lyrics, I love that Pierre doesn't come off as some high and mighty kingpin that other rappers try to pretend to be. Throughout the album, he's dropping nerdy as hell references into Avatar: The Last Airbender, Super Smash Bros. Melee. I mean, the song Retroville is literally named after the town where Jimmy Neutron grew up in. So yeah, go into this album expecting to have fun, and you're going to have a ton of fun. My number 4 album of the year and my art pop album of the year is The Turning Wheel by Spelling. Spelling, with 3 L's, is the art pop synth pop stage name of Christia Tia Cabral. She's been active for a few years now and started to gain a bit of traction in 2019 with her album Maisie Fly. I don't want to be very negative while doing a favorite albums list, but while I did appreciate the aesthetic that Maisie Fly was going for, I just wasn't that captivated by any of the songwriting or performances. Now, contrast that with Spelling's new project from this year, The Turning Wheel. This album has resulted in a huge breakout year for Spelling, and deservedly so. The enormous gap between The Turning Wheel and Maisie Fly, to me, represents an amazing artistic evolution in just 2 years' time. This new album is stunning. It's beautiful. It's Spelling flexing incredible songwriting and album writing talent. I adore how this album flows. The presentation of the LP in the very beginning is very grand, very regal. There's the intro song, Little Deer, a fantastic track with lyrics about love and our relationship with the earth, returning to the earth when we die. Spelling's vocals on this track are gorgeous, and I love all of the brass and horn embellishments that are sprinkled throughout the track and that send us off at the very end. It gives the song a very sophisticated air. The same goes for the second track, Always, which I possibly love even more. I love the swelling string instrumentation, what sounds like violins, that close the song out along with some more hits of horned instruments. But then as the track list continues, you find the soundscapes moving in a more mystical and even weird direction. It's like you're slowly going down a rabbit hole off to some magical place, and then bam, you find yourself listening to the most intoxicating synth worship this year. Like the 7th track, Boys at School. God, I love the synth lead that carries the second half of this track. It's so simple, yet so memorable, and I love how the song progresses as Spelling builds on this lead melody with additional backing piano and electric guitar. The synth breakdown in the middle of the next song, Legacy, is fantastic. It comes out of nowhere, and it's like you're listening to a disco song from Alice in Wonderland. And then the song after that, Queen of Wands, is one of my most played songs of the year. The second half of that track is like Halloween-themed synth worship at its absolute finest. This is just a great LP, a wonderful LP, a huge next step for Spelling's career. Please listen to it and get on board with the Spelling hype train. All right, number 3 on my list is going to be Inside, the songs, in parentheses, by Bo Burnham. I'm specifically referring to the soundtrack here, but I'll get to that in a sec. Jack of all trades, comedian, musician, filmmaker, Bo Burnham. His last comedy special, titled Make Happy, came out 5 years ago in 2016. And although Bo also wrote and directed an entire feature film in the interim, Inside is still a bit of a comeback project. Inside, to me, has the feel of an indie film to it. Before its release, I think the expectation was that this would be a comedy special, like a regular stand-up special, but with Bo's usual quirks. But what we got is so much more than that. It's Bo reflecting on, of course with the title Inside, his experience with quarantining during the COVID-19 pandemic, including how that affected his mental health, how it affected the entire world, and what his role and relationship is with society as both a straight white man and also as a relatively wealthy person with a pretty large following. But of course, Bo, as he's always been,
is very self-aware on this project. There's a part in the song Comedy where he says, "American white guys, we've had the floor for at least 400 years, so maybe I should just shut the fuck up."
I'm bored. I don't want to do that.
It's an extremely funny project that moves at a breakneck, almost overwhelming speed, and the film in particular really just highlights how talented Bo is as a creator in terms of how he's setting up all these different shots and camera angles and how he's creatively using all of these different light fixtures and effects. And of course, he's got some pretty skilled chops as a musician too. Taking the songs away from the visuals still leaves you with a pretty smart and hilarious synth-pop-centric listening experience, but it's really the visuals and the music together, like the entire film, that make it obvious how mind-blowingly creative this undertaking really was. Of course, the film has non-musical elements that don't make it onto the album at all, like when Bo is parodying video game streamers, or when he's reacting to himself. There's also plenty of visual components that accentuate just how funny a lot of the jokes really are that you lose when you're only listening to the album. There's White Woman's Instagram, where Bo acts out every single photo that he's describing, and then the outrageous How the World Works, which is significantly more gut-busting when you actually see Bo talking to a fucking sock puppet on his hand. There's also some pretty meaningful stuff that gets lost when translating from video to just audio. Like with the song FaceTime with My Mom, the song's final lyrics are,
"My mother's covering her camera with her thumb. I'll waste my time FaceTiming with my mom."
calmly repeated a few times. But in the film, you can visibly see Bo getting into a heated argument over the phone. So it's like this obligation that Bo feels to stay connected with his family during a time where society is screaming at us to isolate from the outside world. But ultimately, his attempt to connect with his parents just results in a totally negative experience that feels like a waste of time. So yeah, go watch Inside if you haven't already, because it's a fucking brilliant film. And then keep listening to the album afterwards, because it's also spectacular, with the added benefit that it's not quite as dizzying or stressful of an experience as the film is. Number 2, my second favorite album of the year, and that is coming from Norwegian noise pop indie rock band Pompoko with their album Cheater. I really enjoy the blend of sounds that's happening on this collection of tracks. I'd call the album an indie rock album as an easy way out, but it's so much more than that. It's got some signature math rock tells with quirky angular guitar leads and chords. You know, they have that slight tinge of sounding a bit off key. Then there are also plenty of really noisy, distorted, explosive moments that give the LP a lot of energy and grit. And finally, there are the vocals from lead singer Ragnhild. So airy and sugary, she could easily be singing for a way more bland and run-of-the-mill pop band. But instead, her vocal performance on this album simultaneously clashes with and complements the instrumentals in a gratifying way that's hard for me to describe. It's just such a wonderful pairing. It's almost like the band could go squarely in a much more aggressive and rough direction, which they definitely dabble in with songs like Andy Go to School. That song has a monstrous guitar breakdown during the chorus. However, Ragnhild's vocals always keep the mood grounded right on the very edge of accessible indie rock, like the song Danger Baby. With its strangely off-kilter guitar lead, it almost sounds like the wrong notes are being played. But when Ragnhild's peppy, cheery vocals come in to fill the gaps, the end result is such an addicting sound and song that I can't get enough of. This is a great album, and I'd say it's also a pretty underrated one. If I had to recommend just one album on this entire list, it might have to be Cheater by Pompoko, because truth be told, it's a pretty easy album to get into. In one breath, it's really just an interesting and peculiar indie rock album that I feel like a lot of people could listen to and start enjoying immediately. You know, the appeal of this album and the sound that they're going for is pretty obvious right off the bat, and it's pretty fun and easy listening, all things considered. But the more you keep listening, the more you'll be rewarded as you continue to notice just how unusual the band's delivery really is. Alright, my number 1 album of 2021, Cavalcade by Black Midi. This album is virtually flawless. Black Midi is one of my favorite bands making music right now, and they're without a doubt making some of the most exciting rock music this side of the year 2000. And even calling them a rock band is not doing them justice. They are an experimental jazz, noise, math, prog music ensemble. Hailing from South London, Black Midi stormed onto the scene just 2 years ago with their 2019 debut album, Schlagenheim. I've been utterly enamored with that record since it dropped for its scorching performances, its unconventional and head-scratching song structures, but most of all, because it is an unabashedly weird album. These guys were absolutely pushing the envelope on that album in terms of abrasive rock music with a math rock edge. The album was so good on impact that I was actually kind of nervous because I loved Black Midi so much, and I was thinking there's no way their sophomore album could be as good. Well, I love to be proved wrong, and I absolutely was, because Cavalcade is an album that I didn't know I wanted, but now I cannot live without. Where Schlagenheim felt like catching lightning in a bottle, Cavalcade feels like an expertly arranged blend of jazz rock and progressive songwriting while still undeniably sounding as intense and extraterrestrial as their debut. Where Schlagenheim was noisy, disheveled, and unhinged, Cavalcade is calculated, complex, and even beautiful, while still being totally unpredictable at every second. Some of the tracks on this album, like John 50 and Condra Malaysia Patella, which was my most played song of the year, are the most mind-bending, surreal, climactic musical moments that 2021 has to offer. Simultaneously, though, Black Midi shows us in a big way that they also know how to slow things down and write some significantly more pleasant and peaceful music, something that was completely absent on their debut album. The song Diamond Stuff is without a doubt the most quiet Black Midi song that they've ever recorded, but it still has an excellent instrumental build-up that culminates in a majestic ending. Then there's the closing track, cheekily named Ascending Fourth, which uses an ascending fourth, like the musical interval, as its main melody. The ending of that track, it seriously sends us off like the happy ending to a movie, which, all things considered, is just so tongue-in-cheek because Black Midi has built their fame and popularity so far on making some of the most chaotic, dense, and jarring music this century. And my lord, Morgan Simpson is an absolute animal of a drummer. He's just so creative and off the wall with his drum fills that it's stupefying. His off-kilter drumming is one of the many things that keep you on your toes when you're listening to a Black Midi song. But then in the moments where it just goes all out four on the floor, they make for super satisfying climactic payoffs. I haven't been in a band for a very long time, and I probably won't be for a while, but I would love to make music with this guy. I would fucking trust this guy with my life if he was my drummer. So yeah, Cavalcade, Black Midi, that is my 2021 album of the year. It's a tremendous album, so are all the albums that are on my list. Each and every one of them made 2021 a better year for me. Of course, though, if I snubbed any of your favorites, please let me know. Thanks for watching. Hope you listen to some of these albums, or do whatever makes you happy with your life. Okay, bye.